In the Capitol itself, as I've often pointed out, there are only two museum rooms of a sort in the Capitol, the old Senate chamber and the old Supreme Court chambers, rooms that have been restored to look as they did at an earlier time. Tell us about your restoration of those spaces.
Well, that was very fascinating because it meant digging into the history architecturally of those rooms. And we spent a lot of time and effort to reproduce those as they had been. And of course we had records in the office that enabled us to do that. I think everybody was pleased with the result in those cases. The idea of restoration is particularly interesting because it involves history, and architecture represents history, particularly in the case of an entity like the United States Congress. The fact that it came under the judiciary gave authority for final judgment to the Chief Justice, who heads the judiciary. And we always had a good relationship with the Chief Justice. Warren Burger was the Chief Justice when I arrived, and I may have said this earlier, but after my first two visits with him, on the second visit, which he asked for, he was very interested in architecture and softening the lines of the building. He said, "I paid you what I consider to be a high compliment after our last meeting." I said, "What was that, Mr. Chief Justice?" He said, "I said to my secretary, 'Mr. White speaks like a lawyer,' and I discovered you were one." I may have said this earlier, but the point is we developed a close relationship because of his interest in architecture. And so as these new buildings like the Thurgood Marshall building were developed, we would clear things through the Chief Justice, as well as, of course, the people who were actively going to use the building. But he had the final authority on it. In that regard, we had a competition for the design of the building among practicing architects of note, and we generally tried not to select anybody in advance so that there was no favoritism involved. And we had a committee that I had appointed to review the selections, the submissions, so that, again, we tried to be objective about it so that it wouldn't come out that some friend of mine got the architectural contract because they were friends, rather than by merit.